Hello everyone, it's thomasjujube, and welcome to my review of Kamen Rider Reiwa The First Generation, or as I like to call it, Heisei Generations Forever +1, or should we say +01? This is of course a crossover movie between the final king of the Heisei Riders and the generation starter of the Reiwa era that involves crazy time shenanigans, teal grasshopper colored spandex men, and actually a bit of emotion and a ton of action. There's a lot to this movie and I have a lot to say about it, but to get my quick thoughts out of the way, because I will be going into spoilers, I love this movie. This is one of my favorite Kamen Rider crossover movies ever, which is a bit strange because I'm actually not the biggest fan of Zi-O, and 01's just kind of shaping up to be mediocre for me, because at the time of recording this, it's not finished. There's just something about this movie that's just really amazing to me. Speaking of those two shows, if you're unaware, I've actually done quite a few videos on Kamen Rider Zi-O as a season, including theories and a full season review, and I will be talking about the Gates Majesty V Cinema in the upcoming weeks. And regarding 01, I've only done a first episode thoughts video and some streams, but I will be talking about it as a series and its movies when that all rounds out, and maybe a theory if inspiration strikes me. If you're interested in any of those videos, please consider checking them out after you've watched this video, because now it's time to jump into Reiwa The First Generation. So as I said up front, there's a lot that I actually love in this film, but one of my favorite parts is the general premise of this movie, as it's basically what I personally really just wanted out of Zi-O during its actual airing. The basic plot is that time jackers mess up a bunch of stuff regarding the continuity of a Rider season, and it's all up to Zi-O and the gang to return it all back to the normal timeline and beat that another rider. Pretty simple premise, but I think it's executed beautifully here by making excellent use of aspects already present in 01 and flipping tropes in that season on their head. Obviously, a big one is having Metsubo Jinrai succeed in its mission of making a Humagear world in technicality, and they're converted to basically just a branch of the military here, which is kind of fun to see. Especially Hirobi using his sword for once, but he keeps the sheath on the whole time, and it's a little confusing because that's not how swords work. But anyway, then we have Ames now as basically the terrorist force, since Fua and Yaiba are still leading this group. They never explicitly say it's Ames, but like, you know, it's kind of basically Ames, really. And then we have Hidden Intelligence still being sorta caught in the middle, but I mean, obviously that's not entirely true, because we actually see they're selling a bunch of weapons and drivers from the main timeline as just normal products of the company, and that's really cool. The beginning half of the movie is really just based around that simple idea flip, but I think it works very well, and it's awesome. I just love seeing stuff like this. Then, of course, we actually have our two teams of heroes meet up and go back in time, and I love the way that the movie uses this aspect to build on the lore of 01 in a meaningful way. I loved seeing Koronosuke actually being the president of Hidden Intelligence, and all the Humagears, the pre-Daybreak incident where people just aren't really scared of them, including Aruto's dad and his relationship to the company. When you think about it, he technically is the son of Koronosuke and would be the one you'd assume would inherit the company, and it was kind of fun to have that addressed by him and the other characters. It's not very big, but I kind of just like that. Kind of makes these characters actually feel real in the world of 01. What I really love about Soryo Hiden, though, is that he's responsible for the Humagear receptive technology in the show, the Zetsume Risers and Force Risers, as this backup plan of sorts to make Humagears smile, as he puts it. I'm assuming that after the Daybreak incident in the main timeline, this was either found by Hirobi or the technology was stolen by the Arc, since he's just has it on a computer. In addition, the movie also pretty heavily implies that Soryo as Ichigata is just a canon thing in the history of the show. The time travel nonsense happens after we see him as Ichigata in the past. So it didn't happen because anyone traveled back in time. He basically was already Ichigata back in time. And we see that he also returned some Humagears back to normal as Ichigata, and I really like that little piece of lore because it's implied that maybe Humagears were going berserk every so often, and Ichigata is like the secret vigilante that's returning them back to normal until Daybreak, when he dies, and he can't do that anymore. It's kind of reminiscent of Kamen Rider Skull as the mentor figure that was a movie exclusive rider, but still ties nicely into the lore of the season, but doesn't need to actually be mentioned. This fact alone raises Ichigata pretty high for me in terms of 01 suits. It's really grown on me with this movie, and the way it's used here really elevates it for me. The Cyclone Riser is also really cool. I really wish I could have that driver, but it's premium Bandai, so, you know, That's gonna be a hell of a lot of money. I also like Soryo's interactions with Aruto. For example, Aruto just immediately recognizes that this is his father when he hears his voice, and I really like that. We don't draw this out like, oh, is it Aruto's father or not? It was in the trailers, but Aruto just immediately knows it's his dad, and I think that's pretty cool. And then in the present day, Soryo is also a lot of fun by giving Aruto a bit of tough love, both in the fight scenes at the end to push Aruto past his limit, and he also gives him a belt that stabs him in the waist. Oh. I actually do appreciate, though, that Aruto gets constantly hurt by the Force Riser, not because I hate Aruto and want to see him get hurt, but because, I mean, the thing looks, it's made for human gears, you know, he shouldn't really be able to use it, so I like that he's getting hurt from this because he shouldn't be using it, and it also makes the ending where he regains the powers of the 01 driver and Satellite Zi-O that much cooler, and that much more satisfying, because now he's not getting hurt every time he tries to use a finisher. And while we're on the topic of 001, that is such an amazing suit in both concept and visuals. I love when the main rider has to access his power using a different driver, and 001 really capitalizes on that just because of the aspect in 01 as well. And also one small aspect that I haven't seen anyone mention yet online, I'm probably not the first to actually notice this, but when Aruto transforms into 001, the base suit, not the grasshopper parts, are created from metal cluster locusts, in what I can only call a real cool piece of foreshadowing or just a nice bit of continuity between the two forms and the technology of the arc. Beyond that, the rest of my opinions on the 01 side of things are just a lot of nitpicks really. Having Satellite Zi-O be this weird device that can just transcend time and space and allow Izu and Naruto to remember alternate realities without Time King intervention is weird, but I appreciate that they at least try to explain why Naruto just wakes up in a completely different world. Although Izu will remember things, of course, after this movie, and I find that a little strange because she certainly gains singularity in this movie, right? She shows the most emotion she's ever had in the series, being a robot, and even after they say she's gained singularity in series, she doesn't really have as much emotion as she had in this movie. So it makes this movie kind of feel more impactful just in the broad scope of 01, and it makes me a little disappointed that this scene is exclusive to a movie. I really love the interactions between Naruto and Izu in this movie, not to say that I don't always love their interactions in 01. The second nitpick I have is just more general regarding some of the lore in the Daybreak portion of the movie. As I said, I love that, but there are a few things I'm a little confused about. The show established that at the Daybreak incident, Hirobi was turned into a rider by the Ark and took over the launch site for the Ark, which is I guess what happened here as well, since there wasn't really explanation as to why the satellite wasn't going to launch. But then it just seems a bit weird that's kind of glossed over, since it was a big plot point in the show and wouldn't be affected by time traveling at all. Because of that, I'm assuming that the cast being present in 2007 caused Soryo to become more aware of the Ark's involvement in the rampage in Human Gears, and he tried to take an active role in shutting it down. And then in the main timeline, it's caused by that other dude's father, I think. The movie doesn't really try to acknowledge this, so I'm all just kind of guessing here. And it's also a bit weird that the heroic intervention causes more timeline changes than will as another 01. Because assuming the heroes actually didn't go back in time, we would just have Finis create another 01, and then what does he do? Does he kill the other guy's father, and then Hirobi gets to launch the Ark? Because Soryo wouldn't have been there because he would be with Naruto, right? I don't know. Speaking of Will, I don't have much to say about him. He doesn't really do a lot. Well, he does do a lot, but there's not really much to him. I just kind of like that he fills in the role of Koronosuke's secretary, since the real one is Wazu, but he acts as more of a detective in the world, so that was pretty cool. So on the Zi-O side of things, I said earlier I love this cast's inclusion in the movie as a vessel to jumpstart the plot and get everything moving and integrate it so well with the lore of the season they're crossing over with. Their interactions with the cast is a lot of fun as well. Well, I guess just with Naruto, because the rest of the team largely stays in the present day, which is a little sad because I would have liked to see Fuwa cross over with Gates and Yaiba interact with Waz or Tsukiyomi, whoever they pick. But we don't get that. But at least we get Naruto and Sogo basically kind of take the main story of this as well. And I really like that, though. I like that Sogo gets to use the lessons that he learned over the course of being a writer in his show and not letting the future or your past, depending on perspective, change your actions and continuing to move forward with what you think is right. It's a great lesson for Naruto in the context of the movie, and I love seeing Sogo elevate himself as a legend writer and maybe start to fill out the role of Decade as the go-to writer actor for crossovers. He acts really badass in this movie, especially when he just goes to battle Finis on his own. And then at the end where he's like, we should just wipe Aruto's memory. However that works. I don't think they've ever done that before. He even acquires a new sort of Oma-Gyo transformation at the end, I guess, to signify this. Sadly, he does lose his memories at the end as well with the rest of the group, except the wonderful Waz, of course. But I'm excited to see how this all works out in Gates' Majesty. I at least appreciate that they gave a pretty reasonable explanation for why everyone just teleports into the world of 01 by using the same explanation from Zi-O of how Rider Worlds are just, every so often they'll just coalesce with each other, seen with Kabuto's world getting splintered into Geos in the show. That's not my favorite thing ever, but I appreciate the consistency, so I guess that's cool. Speaking of the cast themselves, I really like their interactions and the quick scenes we get of them at school. It's a great switch from a lot of their interactions in the season, and I can't wait for more of that in Gates' Majesty. Now, Zi-O sadly also introduces the worst part of this movie for me in Time Jacker Finis. Finis kind of doesn't make any sense, outside of the fact that the origin of Time Jackers in general just don't make sense, but that's not really this movie's problem. On paper, Finis' motivation is pretty cool, trying to revert the history of Kamen Riders back to their original intent as an evil force created by Shocker by taking the powers of Kamen Rider Ichigo. But to do this, instead of actually going to steal the powers of Ichigo, much like Time Jacker Tide did in the previous movie with Kuga, they mess with the timeline of 01 and then steal the powers of Zi-O, who has never had any contact with any members of the Showa era outside of a stage show that may or may not be canon. How does that work at all? I feel like the angle they were going for was this is more of another Ichigata rather than an Ichigo, but like even then it doesn't really work because again the powers come from Zi-O. Another Ichigo also doesn't do anything at all because once again looking at another Kuga, when he was created the whole history of Heisei Riders was removed, so you'd think something worse would happen when the first Kamen Rider was removed, but then no, it doesn't do anything. But then, in the present day, for some reason, when another Ichigo is defeated, somehow that just Thanos snaps everything back to normal? Like, how is that even possible? Come on, Zi-O, you were this close to having your time travel somewhat make sense again, and then it got really messed up. I know it's supposed to be somehow connected to destroying the absorbed Gates time machine, but like, how does that work? They said Finis used it to get to the past, but like, why would she go to the past at that point? Because she has the another Ichigo powers. I don't know what's going on here. I think the best way to fix things with Finis is to first of all make the another Ichigo powers come from Ichigata, so you can just have it look like Ichigo as a reference, but you still have everything make sense since Ichigata is technically using Force Riser technology and should still be able to transform, much like 001 can. Then you have the fight with Finis in the present day, involving some weird combination between the new another Ichigo, and then I guess a version of Finis before they became another Ichigo. So the defeat of this different Finis would result in them never going back in time. I think that works. You can let me know down below if that makes any semblance of sense or if the original thing made sense and I'm just stupid, which is probably what's happening here. And if so, then I would have no real problems with this movie. My favorite part of this whole movie is actually that this thing is 1 hour 40 minutes. And yes, there is a lot happening in the movie, but there is also like dead ass 30 minutes of action sequences in this movie, and it's amazing. This movie's soundtrack is absolutely stunning. This is probably my favorite movie soundtrack in all the Kamen Rider movies I have seen. And the choreography is amazing as well, and it doesn't hurt that we've just got some great suits and designs and effects. The beginning has an amazing remix of the Rising Hopper track that leads beautifully into the title card. That is fantastic. Then we get the Shot Rider fights with these really cinematic visuals and these different levels and the intense arrival of 001, Metsubo Junrai, another one, and it ends with a great introduction of Zi-O creating a really badass arrival. Then we get Ichigata, who has awesome speed visuals and multiple emotional soundtrack fights with his son. That last fight, that one shot where it like cuts to just Aruto punching his father, the music that plays for that has been stuck in my head for like days. That is such a good tune. And then at the same time, we also got another Ichigo with its hulking battles that really give you a feel for its size, and it helps that the CG here actually looks good. Another Kuga. And then we get the side cast, switch the villains up where we have Zi-O Riders against the 01 Riders and vice versa. The Zi-O Rider fight is pretty cool. The main standout for me is just we get to see Tsukuyomi more than in the actual show, but the best fight from these two is Vulcan and Valkyrie. Again, this is the best Vulcan Valkyrie fight in the season because they actually play the Ames Rider theme, which is fantastic. I love that theme. And then the final fight is also pretty great, with 01 doing some form spam and Zi-O doing some summon spam. It's really awesome. The way this movie is able to amazingly combine so much amazing action and story and emotion is what makes it stand out so much from the other Kamen Rider movies I've personally seen. This is the first movie where I actually really wanted to rewatch it after I'd just seen it, just for the sake of watching it again for enjoyment. And the worst part is now it's making me want a Cyclone Riser. Ichigata has really grown on me by a significant amount in both suit and character thanks to this movie, and the Cyclone Riser sounds are pretty awesome. So, too bad I won't be able to get one because it's super expensive. Be sure to let me know what you thought of Reiwa The First Generation down in the comments below, and check out those other videos for more Kamen Rider content. I hope to see you next time. Thank you for watching.